Hello everybody and welcome to this all-new season of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, Monica Moore, and we have a fantastic fall preview episode for you tonight. I am delighted to be joined by some of the best sports writers in the region, Paul Frumelt from the Fairfax Times, Phil Murphy from Digital Sports, and BJ Kubaroulas, a contributor for the Washington Post. But before we get to all of that, we want to thank the folks that help make this program possible, our good friends at CCI Screen Printing, for all of your screen printing needs at 703-978-0257. Also special thanks to Fat Boy Photos and Craig Sturbutzel. He's going to be providing us with fantastic photos throughout the season, and you can go to his website and purchase those photos. Also, don't forget, we're on the web, so you can check out our webpage and especially the Video Vault feature where you can see our interviews with some of the players from throughout the region at www.fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. There again is the Video Vault, and you can become a fan of the Fairfax Sports Network on our Facebook page. And finally, if you have comments, suggestions, story ideas, please email us. We promise we do read all of those emails. Well, it has been an exciting summer, so first of all, we want to catch you up on some of the news and notes from around the region. First of all, congratulations to South Lakes graduate and former track standout Vincent Brown. He competed at the USATF Junior Olympics this summer. He competed in the 110-meter hurdles. He won that event with a time of 14 seconds flat. There have been some coaching changes. So first of all, over at South County, T.D. Holzclaw is the new indoor and outdoor track and field coach. Coach Holzclaw, of course, is someone that people know throughout the region. He's been a head coach for about 15 years, including 2 years over at George Mason. He was the 2004-2005 Region Coach of the Year. And speaking of South County, congratulations to Brooke Palmer. She's a gymnast over at South County, and she competed in the Visa Championships this summer in Dallas, Texas. Athletes there competing for a spot for the national team, and among the athletes that were competing there was Nastia Lukin, who of course was the 2008 Olympics all-around champion. She competed on the balance beam. Brooke only missed making the national team cut by 1.45 points. She finished in 13th place, a great effort by Brooke Palmer. Also, more coaching news. Jimmy Linza will be the new head baseball coach over at Hayfield. He will succeed Scott Broyles over there, and of course he is someone else that people in the region are very familiar with. He was the head baseball coach over at Mount Vernon from 2001 to 2005, and he was the Region Coach of the Year in 2005. And finally, congratulations to the West Springfield golf team. They won the Patriot Preview, edging out Lake Braddock. Both teams finished in a tie with a score of 308. They went into a tiebreaker where the fifth place finishers faced off against each other. Thomas Settles was the hero for the Spartans. Great effort by the West Springfield golf team. Well, we've kept you in suspense long enough, so we're going to go into our fall preview, starting out with Concord District football. And first of all, we're going to show you how the standings finished up at the end of last year. Of course, it was Oakton's year. They finished the season, the regular season, undefeated. Their only loss coming to Oscar Smith during that state semifinal. They lost by only a field goal, 10-7. Of course, in that game, Chris Coyer had that scary injury. Great season for the Oakton Cougars. And perhaps another big story coming out of the Concord District last year was perhaps uncharacteristic for Westfield to have those 3 losses, but of course their JV and freshman teams had undefeated seasons, so a lot of people having expectations for the Bulldogs this year. Now we're going to go over to Paul and Phil, who are going to highlight for us some of the stories you're going to want to keep your eyes on as the football season progresses in the Concord District.
All right, Phil, let's just get right to it, jumping into the Concord District. You saw Oakton 13-1. What team's going to come out of the Concord this year, in your opinion?
That's a very hard question to answer, Paul. I mean, there's any one of 5 teams would not surprise you. I think the only one that really would be a surprise is Centerville, and that's no knock on the Wildcats. It's just they had 12 sophomores starting their first scrimmage. They're an extraordinarily young team. So I think you start at the top. Everyone every year wants to talk about Westfield. Mm-hmm. Only have 3 starters back on this team, but remember the team last year, 3 starters back. Monica mentioned the 3 losses. One of those was in the regional semifinal. One was to Oakton, and the other one came by Herndon in double overtime on the road. So I think Westfield is one of those teams that's right at the top of teams you want to talk about. Oakton has their entire offensive line back. So that's kind of where it always starts in the Concord District, is right in the trenches. and you move down, a team like Robinson, I think could surprise a lot of people. They ended the season very strong last year, had Oakton on the ropes. They were up 14 points with just seconds left before halftime. Before giving up 21 points in the fourth quarter in a loss, they went on to beat Herndon, beat Fairfax to close out the season, just missed the playoffs. I think any one of those three teams can win this.
One team you mentioned, Herndon. I like them a lot with Zach Osick coming back for his third year, a dynamic quarterback for the Hornets. You mentioned Herndon. You see teams like that. With Oakton dropping off a little bit, do you think there's going to be a team like a Westfield in 2007 and Oakton in 2008 that's going to dominate, or is going to be so much parity in the Concord District this year?
I think every year in this district you have that team that finds a way to go 9-1, 8-2. The three teams I mentioned, it's very possible. Also, I do like Herndon. Now, Coach Joe Schaefer was very open with me that he does have a lot of places to fill in the offensive line. Yes, all his skill positions are back. Zach Osick's back. He's a third-year starter. Devin Thompson's back. He's essentially a third-year starter. And Nick Impellizzeri was their top receiver a year ago. He's back in the mix. I see Herndon as one of those 7-3, maybe. I mean, they can go anywhere between 6-4 and 8-2, but I don't see a team running the table this year.
And a big reason that we're seeing this parity is a lot of all-star talent leaving the Concord District last year. Phil, what was graduation's biggest toll? Which team got hit the hardest?
Well, in terms of pure numbers, I would say it's Westfield. They only have anywhere from 2 to 4 starters back, depending on how you define a starter. But I think graduation's greatest toll had to be the departure of Torian Pace. 2,717 yards, the 11th highest total in Virginia High School League history. He also had 33 touchdowns in the playoffs. He was huge. 720 yards, 10 touchdowns in their 2 playoff wins.
You see Oakton losing Chris Kohler and Trey Watts. That hurts as well. Talking about Chris Kohler and quarterbacks, field generals, if you will, which one is the best in the Concord District? Because you have Centerville returning their quarterback, Herndon, we mentioned, returning their quarterback. Which one is the best right now?
Well, also, Danny Fenyak comes back. So 3 of the 6 teams have their quarterbacks back. I think that's where you have to start narrowing the list in terms of field general. I would say the top field general returning would be Danny Fenyak on the offensive side. But I think the best field general overall, I'm going to surprise you on this, Brian Lighty from Robinson. The kid is unbelievable. He accounted for 147 tackles last year. Here we're seeing highlights of Fenyak. And again, this kid really has taken on a leadership role in the offseason. Sean Glennon, the 2003 quarterback that led them to an undefeated season, he's actually helped coach Fenyak over the summer. So you really can't have a better Westfield mind coaching you than Brian Day, the quarterback's coach, and Sean Glennon. But I think, again, the best field general, Brian Lighty. Coach Bendorf was raving on his on-the-field leadership ability.
Yeah, definitely. And the biggest dark horse, who do you think? Which team? We talked about Herndon. With Fairfax leaving the district, it's a tight six-team district, not a slouch on the schedule. Which team is a team you think could jump up and surprise some people?
I would have to say Robinson, and it's hard to say Robinson's a surprise team because Bendorf, former national coach of the year, won multiple regional titles, but they came on so strong at the end. He's very high on their quarterback coming back, Lepresti. Very strong player there, and Lighty. You need to have a good defense to win in this league. And also, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Centerville eked out a couple district wins, even though again they have a very young team.
You're not going to see Centerville going 1-9 again
Absolutely
this year.
Not.
And Robinson, they finished 5-5, 3-3 in the district. Again, one of the best districts in the state, the Concord District. So we'll see what's going on there. Let's look at some of the top returning players in this district because there are quite a bit. You see Warren Dane there for Centerville, 400 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. Zach Osick, we mentioned from Herndon, and the Herndon running back Devin Thompson also coming back.
Yeah, Paul, and you mentioned surprise teams. I think Herndon's kind of moved out of that realm of surprise teams. Once you beat Westfield, you're not going to surprise anyone anymore. And I mean, everyone talks about them as a quiet giant. They actually haven't had a losing season since 2003. So this team, year after year, finds ways to scrap for wins in this district. So I didn't want to leave them out of the picture. I do think they'll contend. I just don't think they're a surprise.
And then Andrew Leonard from Oakton, C.J. Ryan from Oakton, 2 returning starters to that team. You mentioned Lighty, the linebacker there, Matt Zanaletto from Robinson, sorry about that. Danny Fennick we talked about, and the linebacker Dylan Doty from Westfield.
Dylan Doty is an interesting case. Brian Day told me they're going to be using him a lot like they used Brian Kennedy a couple years ago. And anytime you use the name Brian Kennedy in Westfield football, kid was an impact player. He only got about 10 carries a game offensively, but he was a 2-time All-Region linebacker, an All-State linebacker as a senior, and yeah, only 10 carries a game. He averaged about 9.5 yards a carry. So that's how they're going to be using Dylan Doty this year.
Moving on now to the Patriot District. And in the Patriot District, you saw West Springfield, Annandale, South County all do well with great records. You see West Springfield 8-4, 6-1 in the district. Annandale also 6-1 in the district. South County there 6-5. West Potomac 6-4, and then you had TC, Lake Braddock, Lee, and Hayfield. Now the big question here for the Patriot District: are there any potential D6 Northern Region champions? Because the Patriot District has not seen one of their current teams win the Northern Region since 2005. Now Robinson has won the district 3 times, but they are now in the Concord District.
Well, you mean 1995?
Sorry.
Since any Division 16, any current Patriot District teams have won that district. Actually, it's been since 1999 since any of the Patriot District teams have even reached the regional final. So once we start talking Patriot District competing with the elite of the elite from the Concord, it's always hard to say, but Lake Braddock absolutely has the firepower. They have about 20 starters back, and again, I say about because it's kind of how you define a starter, but they have the size and the line with Cameron Kolb and Danny Phillips, 2 guys each 6'6", 300 pounds, and of course they have Coach Bill Renner installing his offense. He made famous at West Springfield, put up 1,408 points in 3 seasons at West Springfield. You put him now at Braddock with Michael Niebreck, a quarterback that couldn't fit that system any more perfectly, and a lot of talent around him. 3 all-region defenders returning. I think I wouldn't be surprised at all if you end up seeing Lake Braddock in the regional final game. And at that point, it's a coin flip. Once you get to that game, any team can win.
Now, you mentioned the Bruins and Coach Bill Renner going over to install his offense. A little stats for you that are going to blow your mind. The Bruins scored 227 points last year, and they have not broken 300 points in a season this decade. In 2 scrimmage games this year, they scored 97 points. So that offense is clearly working with Renner at the helm. Phil, also in the Patriot District, plenty of great juniors. You look at the seniors, you're always thinking about these kids that have 1 more year left, but there's some great juniors in this district.
Absolutely, and it starts with Melvin Robinson, one of the top juniors in this state. Absolute phenom at wide receiver. Kid racked up touchdowns last year. He had 2 against Chantilly in the playoffs. Phenomenal athlete. He's also a great basketball player. He's right at the top. You look at Jay Whitmire, offensive lineman from TC Williams. 6 foot 6 inches, 290 pounds, and he has more frame. He can add weight on to his body. He's looking at UConn, North Carolina, Penn State, the cream of the East Coast crop, and Ronnie Van Dyke from South County. Got 3 scholarship offers on September 1st. The first day juniors could actually receive official offers from schools. Those came from Boston College, Rutgers, and Pittsburgh, and you expect to hear from Virginia Tech and West Virginia in the next couple days. So right there, 3 of the best junior prospects in the state of Virginia are within this district.
And then running backs. Great running backs in this district, the Patriot District. Osman Mansoure from Lake Braddock, Jasmine Williams from Lee. BJ Cooper is going to talk about another lead running back coming in. Dan Collins from West Springfield, James Johnson from Woodson. A lot of fantastic running backs in this district.
Absolutely, and you mentioned Dan Collins. Last year he rushed for 1,169 yards and 12 touchdowns, but he only started 5 games. He started the 5 games. Brandon Bailey went out with a very serious finger injury. Collins stepped up. In 5 games, he started 938 yards, 9 touchdowns. Of course, 350 of those coming against Woodson in that game that was one of the highest scoring playoff games of all time. I do like Mansoure. Idris Augustus, 2,500 yards and 26 touchdowns in his 2 years at Paul VI. So I think those are the 2 best guys. And again, Idris Augustus is going to be lining up as more of a slot guy, but joining Jasmine Williams and Greg Lopez in that backfield. BJ will talk about that more, but Lee has a ton of potential to put up a lot of numbers this year.
All right, Phil, 2 districts down, 2 more to go. We have cross country, we have field hockey, we have volleyball. But coming up next, you mentioned BJ Kubarulis. We'll talk about the Lee running back situation. Stay tuned.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm BJ Kubarulis. Well, no doubt, as you heard Phil and Paul talk about, the biggest story in the Northern Region this season, going into this fall season, is Idris Augustus and Eric Wright transferring from Paul VI to Lee. Instantly getting these 2 impact players, Lee becomes a team that can win a Northern Region title. Now, in years past, Lee has always been a team that has kind of slid into the playoffs in this new format because of the tough schedule they have played. Now, this mutiny, if you will, that happened at Paul VI, where Augustus and Wright left the squad where they have been super individually successful, came recently this summer, just a few weeks into the summer. Suddenly, these 2 players who grew up in Springfield with the rest of those Lee players are back with their former teammates from Pee Wee football. So all of a sudden you have these two impact players that are going to add some depth to Lee. Instantly, the Lancers add Augustus at running back. Now, that will add the third 1,000-yard rusher from last season, including, as you heard the guys talk about, QB Greg Lopez and Jasmine Williams. Both of those guys rushed for 1,000 yards. Now, you throw Augustus into the mix. In the WCAC, if you compare these kind of in a BCS way, it's like going from the Big Ten to the ACC, if you will. It's just a different jump in the kind of talent or conference you'll play against. So suddenly, this guy in Augustus, who's rushed for 2,500 yards and 26 touchdowns in his 2-year career in a difficult conference, will be able to run wild in the northern region. Now, I mentioned the mutiny that has kind of played into the hands of Lee coach Rob Everett. Now, Coach Rob Everett, as I mentioned in the playoffs, they've gotten into the playoffs. The team has not had the greatest amount of success, although they've gotten better every year under Everett. But Everett has put more than 30 players into college football. This is the main reason that Augustus and Wright, my sources tell me, have headed to Lee. They felt they were not getting the kind of looks that they thought they should be getting after being top-tier players in one of the top conferences, not only in this area, but in the country. The Washington Catholic Athletic League hosts the Gonzagas and DeMathas of the world. These are the top-tier programs that put out the top players in the country. Augustus and Wright are both undersized. They're 5'9". So which camp are you in? Do you think they weren't getting the looks they deserve, so they need to go to a coach who they feel will shop them? Or are they just undersized guys that just won't get a chance to play at the next level? I think this year is going to be pivotal for those two guys. However, do you think a coach is a person who should be shopping a player? Where does that role fall? Should it be on the parents? Should it be on the individual player? Should they be signing up for recruiting services? Look, I've seen it all. In the years I've been in this business, I've gotten press releases from overzealous parents about their 11-year-old who threw for 1 touchdown before they've ever even taken a varsity or JV snap. I've also seen parents be so hands-off that it has hurt their kids' recruiting stock. I've seen coaches be so super involved that they have talked their kids out of scholarships, and kids who think they're the next Sean or Mikey Glennon that just aren't try to talk their way into a scholarship. There's no rhyme or reason on how to get recruited. This year, Augustus and Wright, they will take that leap from the private school power where individuals are often showcased into the northern region where teams go a long way. We'll see how this year plays out for these two young prospects. Tell us what you think on Facebook. Is this a good move for Wright and Augustus? We're eager to hear from you. Thanks for joining me on this short feature on the Fairfax Sports Report. After this break, Monica Moore will guide the boys on your exploration of the northern region.
Welcome back to the Fairfax Sports Report. Well, we are now going to take a quick break from football and talk a little bit about one of my favorite sports. Longtime viewers of the show know that I like to talk a lot about volleyball, so I'm going to give you the Northern Region Volleyball preview right now. Of course, last year was a very exciting year in the region. Chantilly was the team to beat. They had an outstanding season, ran through the region, winning the Concord District and the Northern Region, and this statistic just absolutely blows my mind. In 22 matches, they only lost 4 games, and they didn't lose a lot of talent, so people are expecting some really big things from Chantilly. Of course, they ran into Albemarle on their run to the state championship, did not get to that final game, but the team that did get to that final game was Jim Boer's Westfield Bulldogs. Sammy Spees was the star player there last year. She had a wonderful 4 years for the Bulldogs. She's playing for Loyola Marymount now. The Bulldogs lost 3-1 to Albemarle in that final, but people expecting very big things from them. Well, I've talked about how Sammy Spees has left the region. Let's take a look at some of the players that I think are the top players to watch. Now, first of all, starting off with some of Ken Moser's players, Celine Alasamaka and Jenny Smith. Centerville always has a strong volleyball program, so people always have high hopes for that team. And Samantha Reeves from Chantilly Last year she was all region and she had 320 kills, an outstanding outside hitter there for Chantilly. And her teammate Allison Williams also is a phenomenal player. So Chantilly, as I said, has all of that talent back. Everyone thinks that they're the team to beat. Steph Hosel from Herndon, Susie Murat from Robinson. Now Susie, of course, has that 23-inch vertical. She's 6 feet tall. She's always a player that coaches talk about when I ask them who's the player to watch in the region. And then finally some Westfield players on that list. Emily Kohler, she had a great game in that final against Albemarle last year with 14 kills. And then Claire Lanigan back. Her sister Kat, of course, has graduated, but Claire is back this year for the Bulldogs. Moving on to some of the other districts now, starting out with Elise Richardson. Coach Sue Shiflett calls her a little fireball. She is the leader of this team. She's the vocal leader. She's going to be counted on a lot this year for Langley that has continually lost talent. They've had a lot of graduation, but we'll see what players step up for the Langley Saxons this year. Jessie Colden in the Hayfield Hawks, of course, moving over to the National District. She's been a player that people have had their eyes on since her freshman year, and another player that people have had their eyes on since her freshman year was Simone Antwe. She is an amazing player. David Prawl has tons of good things to say about her. She can touch 10-3. She has offers from Stanford, from USC, from Duke. She is an outstanding athlete to watch. If you can go out and see South County play this year, I would highly recommend it. Another great player that they have is the Patriot District Player of the Year, Lindsay Stevens. Now in the Liberty District, one of the teams to watch is Stonebridge. Of course, they won the Liberty District last year. Christine Beckham on Monday night, she had 14 digs against Loudon Valley. She's certainly a player that I've got my eyes on. And then Lindsay Gill, she had 425 digs last year. She was the all-region libero. So Stonebridge has a lot of talent. Another great one is Tiffany Vu from over at Woodson. And then Elise Bush with Yorktown is a great player in the National District. Now let's take a look at some players that I also think deserve some mention. These are a couple of young ladies that I think will make some noise for their teams this year, so keep your eyes on them as well. Now moving on, I'll preview for you what I think the big district matchups are. I have these dates circled on my calendar if you want to catch some good volleyball in the region. First of all, Chantilly and Westfield, that's going to be a major Concord district battle. Stonebridge and Langley. South County and West Springfield. Now, West Springfield lost a lot of talent off of last year's team. I'm not sure anybody can touch South County this year in the Patriot District. And finally, Edison versus Yorktown is going to be a good matchup in the National District. Well, as you know, I always rank my top 5, so I will reveal it now. These are my top 5 predictions for this season. Chantilly, no surprise that they're heading the top of the list. 3 all-region first-team players returning, and of course, the region Coach of the Year, Charles Zigbo. People think that Chantilly, in fact, could be one of the best teams in the state, if not the best. And then Westfield, they did lose some talent to graduation. However, they had 16 players on their team last year, the biggest varsity squad that Jim Board had ever had. This year, their schedule is insane, the teams that they play in their non-district schedule. So Westfield is going to be ready to make some noise when we get into the playoffs. Stonebridge, the team that everyone thinks is the team to beat in the Liberty District. I talked a lot about their stars that are returning. And then Herndon, they've been a little quieter than some of the other Concord District teams, but I really think that they're going to take some people by surprise this year. Of course, I talked about how Chantilly only lost those 4 games in 22 matches. Herndon was one of the teams last year that beat them, and then during the Northern Region Tournament, they beat Langley and South County on the road. So this Herndon team, a very good team. And then South County, maybe my mistake that have them ranked at number 5. I think this South County team could really represent the Patriot District extremely well when we get into Northern Region Tournament time. I am so excited about the players over there and really excited to see what they do. Others to watch, always Centerville and Robinson, 2 teams that you can never discount because they will always come in and play very hard. Well, that is the Northern Region Volleyball preview. We're going to move back into football now. We've talked about the Concord District. We've talked about the Patriot District. Let's talk a little bit now about the Liberty District. And last year, Stonebridge was the team to beat. They had an undefeated regular season. Their only loss when they got into the state playoffs. They had so much talent last year. It was ridiculous. Of course, Patrick Thompson, who threw for over 2,000 yards, and a lot of players whose names I talked about on the program over and over again. Zach Thompson, Brian Slay, David Wang, Prince, Allen, the list goes on and on and on for the talent that Stonebridge had. But they lost 20 of 22 starters, so people very excited to see how they're going to do this year. And then another one of my favorite teams to watch in the Liberty District last year was, of course, Woodson. But they will be departing, moving on, going to the Patriot District. But the duo of Connor Riley and Max Weisenegger last year was so fun to watch. So now I'm going to throw it over to Phil and Paul, who are going to tell us about what they think are going to be the big storylines in the Liberty this year.
Phil, Monica just mentioned it. Stonebridge losing that many players, but will they still go undefeated in the district?
They've never lost a game in the Liberty District, 28-0 all time since joining that district. So to get beat, it sounds oversimplified. You have to have someone that can beat you. And you look around the district, Langley lost 3 3-year starters in its backfield between Pritchett, Helmer, and Eklund. Madison doesn't play Stonebridge till week 7. I think they have the best shot in this district. And it's good they play them in week 7 because they have 5 starters hurt that are coming back week 3 or before, and Will Cebulski's done for the year. So they might take some lumps early. They have Oakton open this season. So people might get down on Madison. They might slip under the radar, maybe give Mickey's boys a run. But Coach Thompson says this is the fastest team he's ever had. And for him to say that means a lot. But yes, they do lose a ton of talent. Woodson leads the district. They were always a team finishing either 2nd or 3rd in the district, so that they would be towards the top of the list of potential teams that could beat Stonebridge. Honestly, I don't see it happening this year. I think they're going to go 7-0 through the district. Madison will probably play them very close on the road in Ashburn. I think that fact of it being a road game is going to hurt them. And I think maybe some of the nagging injuries like Jack Rowe, who's having shoulder surgery, he's out a month. Him coming back may not be 100%. Guys like that, I don't see Stonebridge losing a game this year.
Yeah, not likely with the way the talent they bring, all the kids from Ashburn they bring onto that team, and Coach Mickey Thompson. It's going to be hard for a Madison or a Langley to top the Bulldogs. But speaking of Woodson, a team that left the Liberty District, finished 2nd last year, we lose Woodson. Liberty District gets Fairfax. Now Fairfax had a tough time, obviously, in the Concord District the last couple of years. These Rebels went, 1 win, 2 win the last couple of years. Had 4 wins last year, and upseason won their first Concord District game against Centerville last year. So they're on a little bit of an upswing. This is a team that won the Liberty District in 98 and 99. Coming back to the district, when you swap out Woodson, you take Woodson, bring in Fairfax. What's the difference?
Well, I think you have to look at recent record. Now, if you say Fairfax in, Woodson out, Woodson has pretty much dominated that series. They play every year. Woodson's dominated that series every year. So you have to say that, head-to-head, Woodson's winning. They're likely the stronger team. You mentioned 98-99, Fairfax winning this district. They also had Coach Vernon coaching them. They had Brandon Royster. Didn't they have you on the roster too?
They had Paul Fromelt.
Paul Fromelt on the roster as well. So you can't replace a guy like that. But no, they have Jack Beckert and Anton Burns are 2 quality players. I think they'll come in and make an impact. They won't go 1-23 in district play like they did in the Concord the 4 years they were in there. They'll fare much better. They'll compete. I don't think you can just say you'll drop them in and they dominate. I think they'll be one of the number 3, number 4 teams, maybe as low as 5 if they get a little bit injured, lacking a little bit of depth. But I do think they'll come in, they'll compete. They'll probably have 5-5, 6-4 record this year.
All things considered, it's a great move for the Rebels getting out of that ridiculous Concord District, playing teams that Chris Haddock said are more like the Rebels. And now, Phil, last question here. What's the legacy of this Stonebridge class 2009?
Legacy of 2009, first title for Mickey Thompson. He was so close with the teams led by Terrence Glenn and Wadloo Brown and all those guys. They won the state title in 2008, and they did it in dominant fashion. They dropped the 1 game to Robinson, where Peter Ferrara just played out of his mind, but they ran through the district, ran through the state tournament. They shut out Potomac in the state championship game. A lot of those guys came back last season. And they had 4 guys in their front 7 go on to Division I scholarships. And Monica named them all, Wang, Slay, Thompson, and Olson, just in their front 7. I was writing the preview for Digital Sports, and I'm looking at all the key departures, and I weighed on putting Nate Ingersoll on the list because he only signed a Division III scholarship. That's how talented this team was. I think it's going to be a little while before we see a team tear through their district schedule as Stonebridge did. I think that there's one team, it's the current Edison squad. We'll get to them later. But I think it's when you talk about district dominance and even Division V dominance, aside from the Beach, Stonebridge is a team that's once in a decade type team.
Let's take a look at some of the top returning players in this Liberty District. You see Anton Burns there from Fairfax. He's a JV standout last year. Farhan Khan, Langley head coach John Howerton told me that Khan hit a couple of plus 40 field goals last year, one in a driving rainstorm, so he's definitely a great...
he's got to be the first kicker off the board in most Liberty District fantasy leagues. He's outstanding.
Now, here's what Marcus Harvey, me and Phil have been talking about this kid, son of Ken Harvey, former NFL Pro Bowler with the Redskins. Now, Coach Cowerton also told me that Harvey is one of the fastest kids he's had at Langley in his 7 years, and Harvey leads a great backfield, new backfield for Langley, one of the fastest backfields they have had with players like Yee and McMichael coming in as well. So Langley, you see, Phil, is going to have a good, nice, fast team this year.
Again, but they have a lot of pieces to replace in their offensive backfield. You mentioned Yee, he's coming off an ACL injury. Harvey, very fast, but again, he's only a sophomore. I think he's going to be the second or third running back. Now, granted, once he becomes the feature back, I think he's going to tear things apart. It's just, can Langley get over that learning curve with having three-year starters from its backfield gone?
Abe Yee and James McMichael, a transfer from Potomac School. Moving on, James Devins from Madison, another place kicker that's looking to have a great year this year. Riley Barrow from McLean, Kevin Ball from South Lakes, Jawan Jones from South Lakes. You got some returners for Stonebridge, Marcus Harris and Kyle Gavea, and then Alex from Jefferson. So rounding out some of the top players in the Liberty District. Now, Monica Moore is going to set you up for the National District. One more district to go. Monica, what you got for the National?
That's right, the National District, also a very exciting district last year. Edison was absolutely outstanding. Let's take a look at what the standings looked like at the end of the season last year. Edison went 10-0 during the regular season, and in accumulating that record, they beat Chantilly and West Springfield on the road. So that was an outstanding season for Edison. Of course, a big reason for that, they had so much talent. But Levi Barber, their junior quarterback last year, back this year, he had over 1,000 passing yards. And one thing that people really like about him is he is so good with his feet. He's a good rusher, and so people are very excited that Levi Barber is going to be back for Edison. And then another team that people were talking about was Mount Vernon. Perhaps in prior seasons they'd lost a little bit of what people had come to expect from them, but they had an outstanding season last year. Lots for the Majors fans to be very happy about. So I'm going to turn it back to Paul and Phil to let us know what they think are going to be the big stories in the National District this year.
Just like the Liberty District, Stonebridge and the Liberty District, Edison dominates this National District. Unlike Stonebridge and the Liberty District, Edison returns some great players, Phil.
They do. They bring back Levi, Uno Cero Barbo, whatever. My Spanish isn't that good, but a great leader. He's been a guy that they've seen since his freshman year that they knew was going to come in and kind of take the reins from his brother. A very talented, versatile guy. They bring back Angus Harper. Now, they do lose Stefan Robertson, a guy that led them in tackles 3 straight seasons, and last year had 24 rushing touchdowns. He's down at JMU. They lose Frank Figueroa from the offensive line. But yes, 8 starters back on offense, including Christian Washington, a very dynamic wide receiver. We talk about Edison dominance. They've only lost 2 district games since November 2003. Those were to Loudoun Valley in 2005 and Yorktown in 2006, and they came back to beat Yorktown in the playoffs, and Loudoun Valley's not in district anymore.
No longer.
Extremely dominant team. Every coach you talk to, they'll say it off the record, but basically every coach says it's Edison +7.
Some of the numbers for Levi Barber: 1,179 passing yards, 13 TDs, and his receiver Christian Washington, 426 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns. So Edison returning a major squad. But then again, there's a new team in this district. We mentioned Woodson going to the Patriot, Fairfax coming to the Liberty. You got Hayfield here in the National District, and Hayfield's a team that had a hard time in the Patriot, just like Fairfax did in the Concord. But Hayfield returns some great players. They got a great quarterback. They might make a difference in this district.
Oh, they absolutely will. I mean, it's undoubted. You know, they were one of 2 Division V teams playing up in the Patriot District along with Lee. So the move kind of still helps them with the size of the school, student population. Now, they're still the 3rd smallest school in the National District, so they don't just come in, show up, and suddenly have numbers on everyone. But the kid you mentioned at quarterback, Anton McCollum, runs 4.46 in the 40, still awaiting his first D1 offer, but Coach Billy Pugh said the kid's never going to step foot off the field. Also, sophomore running back Stephen Lynch put on 15 pounds of muscle in the offseason. He was wowing coaches as a freshman, got a lot of carries last year, and Rayshawn Riggins, you might recognize the name from the basketball season, another great running back. So Hayfield at the skill positions is very solid. They'll have Justin Summers leading them in the trenches. I see them as one of those third or fourth place teams immediately coming in and quadrupling their wins from a year ago.
Yeah, doing my football preview for the Fairfax County Times, I emailed some coaches and I said, who are some of the players to watch in this national district? And the majority of the coaches that got back to me said, that QB from Hayfield, he's a kid to watch. I keep on hearing how quick, how athletic he is, so he may be able to make a difference. Moving on, but speaking of quarterbacks, who's the best quarterback in this national district? And I know your answer.
You know my answer. Levi Barber. Maybe it's just biased because I've known him since before his freshman season, but the kid is just gotten better and better every year, and Coach Vaughn Lewis is beaming at him. He's very important to this team. They don't really have an answer if he goes down to injury. I mean, he's so important to this team's success. He's getting the ball to Washington, who had more receptions than any guy last year, so I think he's going to repeat his success from a year ago. His numbers are only going to get higher because Angus Harper's now the feature back. They don't really have two backs they can go to, but I don't think he'll be throwing late in a lot of games. I think they're going to be leading a lot of games with big margins, just like they have for a few years now.
You mentioned Anton McCollum. I want to put one name out there for you.
You do.
Kid Jason Friday.
Stewart.
Many people have not heard of him from Jeb Stewart. He missed the entire 2008 season. Coach Roy Ferry from Stewart, this is what he said to me. He's the best quarterback in the district. That made me step back because coaches don't usually boast like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited to see what Jason Friday has. I haven't seen him play. Not many people have seen him play. But Friday could make a big difference for Jeb Stewart.
Yeah, Friday took a team in 2007 that didn't have very good numbers, a JV team now, in 2007, his sophomore year, and he led them to a 5-5 record, which at Stewart is kind of like an 8-2 record at most of the bigger programs, just because their numbers are so low. Yeah. So yes, very talented quarterback. How he responds from that injury, I think, is a question mark, but we'll know in the first couple of games.
We established Edison's dominance. They're going to be number one. We think number one in the national district. Who's number two?
I like Yorktown. Coach Bruce Hansen's the longest tenured coach in the Northern region, so he absolutely has experience. But for the first time in his 25 years there, he's switching the offense. They're moving from a wing tee to a spread, and he said basically because they have the personnel to do it. Sam Nottingham, the quarterback, and Mike Veith out wide, who's an all-region receiver, they're going to be hooking up a lot this season for touchdown passes. Charles Banks comes back. I think Yorktown can make a lot of noise in this district, but the kid they lost, Kyle Toulouse, now at Holy Cross, was everything for them. Running back, receiver, quarterback, safety, punt returner, punter. He did everything for this team, but I think they bring back a ton of talent. They've got a great coach. He said, though, he's going to be pretty stubborn about it. Even if the spread doesn't work, he's going to stick through it and get through the growing pains. So if they do struggle implementing that offense, maybe they'll take a couple losses in the regular season that otherwise they wouldn't have taken, but come playoff time, this is a team to watch out for.
Let's take a look at some of these top players returning in this national district, led by Levi Barber. We just talked a lot about him, and Christian Washington from Edison. Falls Church has a couple of players returning, and we talked about Anton McCollum and Jason Friday.
Falls Church, you'd like to see them stay healthy this year. In 3 seasons, 2005, 6, and 7, they lost an impact skill position player to a season-ending injury. You thought they were good last year. They lost 7 starters by week 3, but they have a young team. I think they could come up and, maybe win 3 or 4 games this year, which is more than years past.
And looking at Theo G from Mount Vernon. Now, I think Mount Vernon may be one of the best teams in the national district. They finished, 5-1 last year in the national district. They have a chance to knock off Edison, possibly, with Theo G at running back.
They have to replace all 5 offensive linemen, and they averaged 270 across the line last year, so that's some big boys to replace. But yeah, athletes like Theo G, they have Andrew Sable under center. They definitely will win a lot of games. I see them competing with Yorktown for that second position.
The best name in the Northern region, offensive lineman, linebacker Rock Battle from Washington and Lee returns as well. Charles Banks from Yorktown and Mike Veith from Yorktown. So again, you mentioned some of the Yorktown players.
Yeah, and again, I love the name Rock Battle. There's a kid at Oakton a couple of years ago named Brian Song, which I thought was one of the best names. But Roderick Rock Battle, he goes by Rock. Yeah, make you tear up a little bit, Brian Song. Rock Battle, great name. He actually might see some carries at running back in short yardage situations, but that's just because he's been really bugging the coaches in their ear about it. Really eager player, great vocal leader on the field. I can see him really making an impact.
All right, so we've talked about the Concord, we talked about the Patriot, talked about the National, talked about the Liberty. Now Monica's going to show you who we think are the top 10 teams in this region.
Well, that's right. It's one thing to talk about the districts individually, but our sports writers have ranked them the top 10 in the region, comparing all the teams against each other. These are the predictions for how we think that the season's going to play out. Now, Lake Braddock, of course, certainly a lot of people have high expectations for them. Obviously, the addition of Bill Renner. Everyone's been talking about that. They're looking very good, and they have all of that talent returning. But of course, Coach Poitras has said, you know, they weren't a state championship team last year, so people have to wait and see what they're going to do. But we think that Lake Braddock is definitely going to be a team to beat in the region. And then Westfield, we talked about those 3 losses that they had last year. Last time that happened for them, they came back and had a stellar season. And so lots of high expectations, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, with both the JV team and the freshman team going undefeated last year. Now, Edison, how could you not be excited about this team? The guys have talked at length about Levi Barber and what an exciting quarterback he is to watch. A lot more of the burden obviously being placed on Christian Washington this year, but Edison, certainly a dominant team in the national region, people expecting them to make, in the national district, people expecting them to make a lot of noise in the northern region. And then Stonebridge, even with all of those losses, you can see how much respect they give you. The guys talked about just the history, what they've put together since the past few years have gone by, and so Stonebridge, you can never ever count them out. They have a lot of talent over there. Players that didn't get as much of the playing time last year will be expected to step up. Lots of great talent. Oakton, of course, some people might think we have them ranked a little low. We'll see what happens. They lost a ton of talent to graduation. Again, we talked about the names. Chris Hoyer, Meadows, of course. Lots of talent lost, but Oakton always a good team. And then South County, in my opinion, they were one of the most exciting teams to watch last year. I talked about them a lot on the program because sometimes you count them out and they would just do amazing things. You never know what Pete Bendorf has up his sleeve, and so South County, certainly a team in the Patriot District that I would expect to make some noise competing against Lake Braddock. Herndon, we talked about the talent that they have returning, including their quarterback, Zach Osick, so people expect for them to have a good year. Chantilly, again, perhaps in past years they've been a little higher on our rankings, but we still do expect good things from them, as well as from Robinson. And then West Springfield, they're number 10. Some question marks after the loss of Bryn Renner. They averaged about 44 points per game last year, but now that he has moved on to North Carolina, people wonder what their offense will do. And of course, we've talked about, again, how Bill Renner has gone over to Lake Braddock. Well, every week we pick our games of the week for the games that are upcoming. So we'll show you the games that we've selected this week, and then all of us pick who we think are going to win those games. And I'm going to turn it over to the guys to let them defend their picks. Now, they didn't disagree about a lot, but you can see the one thing that they did disagree about was Westfield Stonebridge. So I want to hear both arguments.
All right, Phil, so starting out, let's go with the one we all agreed on, Lake Braddock against Langley. We just showed that we think Lake Braddock is the top team in this region right now, so no surprise, we're picking them over the Saxons. Edison beating West Springfield again. We talked at length how good we thought Edison was. Here are some of the picks that we didn't agree on. You took Westfield, I took Stonebridge.
Yep.
Discuss.
I think Westfield, again, depth in the Concord District. We always talk about returning starters. Losing returning starters means less in the Concord District than anywhere else. Look at Westfield last year, 21 starters gone, still went 8-2 through the regular season, and we call it a down year. And then Robinson in 2000 lost 43 seniors from their roster, come back and win the state title in 2001. So yes, a lot of guys lost, but also a lot more in. They have a deeper pool to pull from. Almost twice as many students at Westfield as Stonebridge. So I think both losing a ton of starters, I think it's going to hit Westfield less. But Mickey Thompson's offense is almost impossible to defend if you had never seen it before. Mm-hmm. I get lost filming it. It's difficult, and then from a field perspective, with all that speed, everyone moving around you, if it's well executed, Stonebridge can cause some trouble. I just think that the numbers at Westfield, the size at Westfield is going to be a little bit much for them to overcome.
Monica taking Westfield, BJ taking Westfield. The reason I took Stonebridge is simple. We don't know much about these two teams yet. Westfield, Stonebridge, both lost a lot. What I do know is I know the coaches. I know Tom Verbanek. I know Mickey Thompson. I trust both these coaches. I know there's going to be good squads. I took Stonebridge because they're the home team. That's literally the reason that I took Stonebridge. Was I thought, they're at home. So Westfield doesn't, they have to travel out to Ashburn. It's really a toss-up, in my opinion. I took Stonebridge. Another game that we agreed on, South County beating Chantilly. Yeah. But then you have BJ, the lone person. taking Chantilly. He's not here to defend himself.
It's funny, when Pick'em comes up, BJ leaves. So when we have to, run off the set with coaches chasing after us, BJ's out the door. But this pick actually I agonized over more than the Stonebridge Westfield pick. Again, because I talked about numbers. Chantilly has a lot of numbers back, and guys like Mike Ferris, Chris Martin, Kevin Rudolph are going to have huge seasons for them. It's just, you're talking about week one, first time guys are seeing it. You can say scrimmages, game speed. This is the real deal. South County, Aaron Andrews is a third-year starting quarterback. I do have faith in him. And that secondary for South County is just awesome. Andre Simmons, a very bright kid, 8 D1 offers. And they're to some smart schools, Northwestern, Vanderbilt, UVA. And then Ronnie Van Dyke, who by the time we're talking here probably has more offers on the table than the 5 I mentioned. Just outstanding secondary for them. Very talented team, top to bottom. But that one really troubled me because I know Chantilly. I know the numbers. I know how they always find pieces to replace. But pace is maybe the biggest piece that's missing on any team this season for anyone.
People might call me crazy. There's 2 Concord teams playing games in our week 1 pick'em. I picked against both Concord teams. That seems like a ridiculous thing to do, but there's one thing that I think is going to be kind of a theme this year. The Patriot closing the gap with the Concord District, being just as good, if not better, this year with the Lake Braddocks. That's why I have South County over Chantilly. I like what Pete Bendorf has over there with the Stallions, so I think that maybe South County has a chance here to knock off a Concord team. And I think we're going to be seeing more Patriot teams kind of getting to the level of these Westfield, Oakton, Concord teams. Yeah,
to that point, I do see in Division 6 the Patriot District catching up to the Concord District. I don't see them surpassing it just because the Concord's been so dominant for so long. And Division 6 is basically Patriot and Concord with a few Liberty teams sprinkled in there. No current Patriot team has even reached the regional final in 10 years. When B.J. Quigley was at quarterback. Now, his younger brothers, Tanner and Tyler, are at Lake Braddock, and they're going to do great things once we get out of their sophomore seasons. But a team like Lake Braddock, West Potomac, that have size, I think that's the biggest thing. They have size. They have strength on the lines. Every one of the Braddock linemen benches 325. Dan Carricker, junior for West Potomac, Eric Henderson called the strongest kid pound for pound on the team, and he's 300 pounds. Just absolute beasts in the Patriot District. I do think this is the year they close the gap. I could see one of those teams reaching a regional final. I'm throwing West Potomac in that mix. I think they're a dark horse, but I don't see the Patriots surpassing the Concord. Just too many strong teams.
There's a telling quote Pete Bendorf mentioned from South County. He also coached at Oakton. Here's a quote he told me. I think the gap is close between Concord and Patriot, but I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is the year that it flip-flops. I still think that football over there in the Concord is pretty special. So we'll see what happens. Should be a great year. But we're not done yet, guys. We got field hockey, cross country. Monica Moore is going to set us up for some field hockey.
Well, and before I do that, I am here to defend my pick. So I'm going to let you know why I picked the teams that I picked. Now, first of all, we did have a little bit of the debate about Westfield and Stonebridge. Now, I liked Paul's method there of picking the home team, but the reason that I went with Westfield, first of all, I talked about all of that young talent that they had with the JV and freshman teams going undefeated last year, and then I talked a lot about that record and those 3 losses that they've had some time to think about over the summer. I think that stung a little bit, so I think they're going to come out very hungry. That's why I gave the edge to Westfield, but I think that's a very close one to call on Friday night. I would highly recommend that one as a game to see. Now, of course, the other big contention point that we had was the South County Chantilly matchup. We had BJ going with Chantilly, the rest of us going with South County, and I made my picks for a couple of reasons. One thing being the returning quarterbacks. Of course, South County has their starting quarterback returning. I think that's really important, especially so early in the season. And then, as I said, South County last year surprised me so much. They were such a dynamic team to watch, and so I think that the same will be true for this year. Well, that's it for football. Now we're going to move on to another one of our favorite fall sports, and that is field hockey. Last year, as we got into the postseason, of course, Westfield and Lake Braddock both having amazing seasons. Phil has been covering the field hockey team, so I'm going to turn it back to him so that he can give you a little bit of a preview of what to expect.
Field hockey, Northern Region. 2 teams last year that stood out, Lake Braddock and Westfield, both went down to the beach, both won a game, but both got bounced in the semifinals. I think some of the teams to watch this season are going to be Westfield and South County. I had them as a 2 noted in my preview, but take a look at some players to watch. There's definitely some talent around this region. Primarily. A lot of Concord District talent. Again, Westfield, great season last year. They went 22-8, but they do bring back a good number of starters, headlined by senior midfielder Kelsey Grainer, senior forward Molly Gift, and Robinson and Oakton. Again, Oakton was the Northern Region runner-up just 2 years ago. Do have a first-year coach this year, and they did have a good showing at the Bulldog Invitational Tournament. But you look at Lake Braddock. The two girls we mentioned are both juniors. Brittany Hopkins, who was their leading scorer last year, she had 19 goals for them, and Allie Frody, both forwards. However, Lake Braddock has no seniors on their current roster. They graduated 12. Yes, this team only lost one Northern Region game last year, but when you lose co-Northern Region Player of the Year Annie Stevens, when you lose an all-region player like Anne-Marie Gambesha, a lot of talent gone, a lot of talent to replace. So I think this is going to be a down year for Lake Braddock, but they're very junior heavy, expect them to come back. And Megan Weirs from South County has to replace Megan Rhea, but they only lost 3 seniors this squad. So automatically I put them at the top of my preview. But one team that I didn't mention in my preview, and I really should have, West Springfield. You look at the Patriot District, the obvious contenders, Lake Braddock, South County, Woodson, Annandale, throw them all in the mix. West Springfield went to the Bulldog Invitational Tournament where South County and Westfield were both there, and they won it. Junior Danielle O'Brien scored 4 goals in that tournament, and she was just outstanding. This team, they only yielded 1 goal in the tournament, but they did lose to Robinson in their season opener, so they are 4-1, but it's kind of hard to sleep on a team last year that was 11-5. They reached the Patriot District semifinals, lost to South County, and in the first round of the regional tournament, lost to Westfield. So it wasn't so much a lack of talent, but just an extraordinarily tough draw, having to play South County and West Springfield back-to-back. But as we take a look at some of the other highlighted players around the region, Shelly Montgomery, this girl is the real deal. She's head and shoulders the favorite to win Northern Region Player of the Year. She was a co-region player of the year last year, scored the game-winning goal in the district championship game as a sophomore 2 years ago. And Fairfax, Bailey McDade, senior forward. Fairfax moves into the Liberty District, and I think with Woodson's departure, automatically becomes the favorite. Bailey McDade for this team, Fairfax, that went 16-4 last year. They ran the Concord District regular season table. Now, they did get upset in the tournament, and then Annandale, a team who got very hot, knocked them out of the regional tournament. I think they're the favorite. I think second in that district is McLean, led by Elisa Enriquez, the midfielder. They actually beat Lake Braddock in their season opener August 24th. And Kelly Kreider, they lose Amanda Kreider, the goalkeeper, who was a 2-time All-Met, a 2-time All-Beltway for digital sports. But they get Kelly Kreider back, a girl first-team All-Region defender, absolutely outstanding. And Hope Smith for Jefferson. Jefferson, great defense returning. They only went 10-11 a year ago. The question mark for Jefferson, the X factor, has to be how much can they score. Now, moving on to the National District, Edison, led by junior goalkeeper Danielle Boyd. They won 3 state district titles. Last year, Yorktown stopped that by beating them in the district championship. Hope Barazzato, the defending National District Player of the Year. Great, best player coming back. I see no reason why she shouldn't repeat. And Washington Lee, they had 3 all-region players. 2 of them are back, highlighted by Kelsey Clark. And Hayfield comes into the district, which is an interesting note because the Hayfield coach, Lauren White, her mom is Ginger White, the head coach at Edison. Those 2 teams play October 2nd. It'll be a very interesting day in the White household, but I'll kick it back now to Monica for some cross country.
That's right. There's one sport we haven't yet talked about. So before we go, we want to talk a little bit about cross country. Now, first of all, with the boys, and every time I talk to cross country coaches, as we were leading up to our fall preview episode, they said that the boys are going to be the surprise in the region because no one's really sure what team's going to step up. But here you see some of the guys that we're really expecting a lot from this season. Some returning from last year's list. Of course, Kevin Dowd back, had an injury last year. People expecting a lot from him during his senior year. And Chris Foley from Chantilly, certainly one to beat in the Northern Region. A couple of new names to the list. You see some Lake Braddock runners there, and then Centerville, new addition, some repeats from last year. But the guys, not quite sure who's going to be the team to beat, so an exciting one to watch in the region. Now the girls, on the other hand, absolutely stacked with talent. Making this list was so difficult because there are so many young women in this region that deserve to be on the list. You see there again some names that you expect to see. Liana Epstein, no surprise that she's on the list, probably the favorite in the region. And then a couple others that returned from last year. One I'm very excited about is Maya Hicks, who had a great showing last year. So people expecting her to carry on the name for Edison after the years they've had in the past for Bernadette Flynn on the Edison cross country every team. Well, that is it for our fall preview episode. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, we once again want to thank the folks that helped make this program possible, our good friends at CCI Screen Printing. And also, we want to thank Fat Boy Photos for providing us with photos throughout the year, and you can get those photos on their website. Check out our website and Pressbox Video, where you can get videos of what we do, and then our website where you have news notes and the Video Vault feature. You can become a fan of the Fairfax Sports Network on our Facebook page. And finally, send us any news notes, story ideas, comments, or suggestions to the Fairfax Sports Report. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next week with more from around the Northern region.